Emma never thought of her marriage as complicated. She and Daniel had built a quiet life in Oregon, a life full of routines that felt safe. Weekends were for coffee at the diner downtown, evenings were for reading by the fire, and summers were for tending to the little garden behind their house. To their friends, they looked steady, almost unshakable. But beneath the still surface, Emma sometimes sensed something restless in her husband. Like he carried a thought he could not share. It showed in small ways at first. He would pause mid-sentence and then change the topic. His eyes would wander while they walked through town, as if he was somewhere far away. At night, when Emma leaned against him, she could feel the tension in his shoulders, the weight of something unspoken. She had asked him many times, "Are you okay?" And he always smiled and said, "Of course, just tired." But Emma knew her husband well. She knew when he wasn't telling the full truth. One evening in late October, as the first chill of autumn crept in, Emma decided not to ignore it anymore. They had just finished dinner, the plates still on the table, when she saw him pacing near the window. His hands moved restlessly, opening and closing as though he were holding words he couldn't release. She placed her fork down and said quietly, "Daniel, please, talk to me. What's going on?" He stopped. His eyes met hers, and for a second Emma thought he might brush it off again. But something in her tone, the worry she couldn't hide, seemed to cut through his hesitation. He walked back to the table, sat across from her, and lowered his gaze to his hands. The silence was thick, broken only by the hum of the refrigerator in the corner. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft, uncertain. "Emma, there's something I've always wanted to tell you. Something I've kept to myself because I was afraid." Her chest tightened. Afraid, her mind raced. Was it about their marriage? About another woman? About something from his past? 1,000 possibilities crowded her thoughts, each one heavier than the last. She reached for his hand, steady but trembling inside. "Daniel, whatever it is, I'd rather know the truth than live with a wall between us." He squeezed her hand. But he still looked down, as though the table was safer than her eyes. "It's nothing bad," he whispered, "but it's something I've carried for years. I didn't tell you because I thought you'd think it was foolish. Or worse, you'd say no, and then I'd lose even the hope of it." Emma studied him closely. He wasn't angry, he wasn't guilty. He looked almost like a boy caught with a secret dream. The realization surprised her. Maybe this wasn't a confession of betrayal, but something else, something she hadn't expected. Still, her heart pounded, torn between fear and curiosity. She leaned forward, her voice calm but firm. "Daniel, we've been married 8 years. Whatever you're holding on to, I want to hear it. Don't keep it inside anymore." For a long moment, he was silent. Then, with a breath that seemed to release years of hesitation, he lifted his eyes to hers. They've shone with both longing and uncertainty. His lips parted, and in that fragile moment, Emma knew that whatever came next would change everything between them. Her pulse quickened. She gripped his hand tighter, ready for words she had waited so long to hear. And then, finally, Daniel began to speak. Daniel's words came slowly, as if each one carried the weight of years. He took a deep breath and said, "Emma, I've always dreamed of traveling across the country with you. Just us in a small camper. No schedules, no deadlines, no one expecting anything. I want to wake up in new places every day, see the mountains, the oceans, the little towns no one talks about. I want us to live free together." Emma froze, her mind trying to catch up with what she had just heard. Of all the things she had expected, this was not one of them. She thought of confessions of heartbreak, of secrets that could tear them apart. But this was different. She blinked at him, unsure whether to laugh or cry. "That's your secret?" she asked carefully, her voice softer than she intended. Daniel nodded, his expression serious. "Yes, it's more than just a trip. It's a life I've wanted for years. A life where it's just you and me, without the noise of work and bills and schedules. I want to live a story, Emma, not just read about one." Her heart twisted. She could see it in his eyes, the longing, the hope he had carried alone for so long. He wasn't joking. He wasn't daydreaming. He was sharing a piece of himself that he had hidden even from her. And in that moment, Emma realized how much it had cost him to keep this inside, but the weight of his words also pressed on her chest, leaving everything behind. Selling their things, living on the road, the idea felt wild, almost reckless. She thought about their jobs, the house they had built, the safety of routines. Could she really walk away from all of it? Daniel, she said slowly, this isn't just a weekend trip. This is everything. Our whole life would change. He nodded, his jaw tight, as if bracing himself for her refusal. I know, and I was afraid to tell you because I thought you'd say no. But I can't keep it inside anymore. I want this, Emma. I need this. And the truth is, I don't want to do it with anyone but you. His honesty cut through her hesitation. She looked at him, really looked at him, the man she had married, the man who had stood by her side for years. And now here he was, vulnerable, risking rejection just to share his dream. Her heart ached with tenderness. She had never seen him like this, caught between fear and hope. And part of her couldn't stop imagining it waking up in the mountains. Cooking breakfast by a lake, driving through endless highways with Daniel beside her. It felt terrifying, but also alive. That night, Emma lay in bed, unable to sleep. The house was quiet, but her thoughts raced. She stared at the ceiling, her mind filled with images of what life could look like if she said yes. She pictured the camper parked by the ocean, Daniel laughing as they burned marshmallows by the fire. The two of them watching sunsets in places they had never seen before. But fear pressed in too. What if they ran out of money? What if the road was too hard? What if saying yes meant losing the safety they had built? She turned on her side and looked at Daniel, already asleep, his face calm under the dim glow of the bedside lamp. For years, she had thought of him as steady, grounded, and now she saw the boyish dreamer inside him. Foy was the one who had been waiting for her to believe. She realized then that he had carried this secret for so long because he was scared she wouldn't share it. And that thought broke her heart. By morning, she knew she couldn't ignore it anymore. Daniel's dream wasn't just about travel, it was about them. It was about living in a way that brought them closer, about writing a story they could call their own. When the first light of day touched the room, Emma turned toward her husband. He was awake, watching her quietly, as though waiting for a verdict. His eyes carried the same hope, the same fear. Emma reached for his hand. Her voice trembled, but it carried a certainty she hadn't felt the night before. Daniel, let's do it. Let's chase this dream together. His eyes widened, disbelief flashing before joy overtook him. For a moment, he didn't move, as if he couldn't trust what he had just heard. Then his face broke into the brightest smile she had ever seen. He pulled her into his arms, holding her as if she had just given him back a piece of his soul. His voice shook as he whispered, "Emma, you have no idea what this means to me." And in that embrace, Emma realized her answer hadn't just freed him, had freed them both. The morning Emma said yes, something shifted between them. Daniel looked at her as if the weight of years had lifted off his chest. His smile was brighter, his laugh came easier. And even the way he reached for her hand felt different, lighter, freer, full of gratitude. Emma realized she hadn't seen him this alive in a long time. From that day, their life moved at a fast pace. Plans formed quickly. They started selling furniture they didn't need, giving away boxes of old clothes and listing their house. Friends and neighbors thought they were reckless. Some shook their heads, warning them they'd regret it. Others envied them secretly, though no one said it out loud. Emma stayed quiet, but deep inside she felt a spark she hadn't known she was missing. The camper came first. It wasn't big or fancy, but it had everything they needed: a small bed, a tiny kitchen, and enough space for the two of them to squeeze in and laugh about how little room they had. When Daniel brought it home, his excitement was contagious. He showed Emma every corner as though it were a palace. She laughed, shaking her head at how small the shower was. But secretly she admired how his eyes shone with pride. Weeks turned into days, and suddenly it was time. They packed essentials, said goodbye to their house, and climbed into the camper. Emma sat in the passenger seat, her bag at her feet, her heart pounding as the engine roared to life. Daniel glanced at her, his hand reaching across to squeeze hers. "Ready?" he asked. Emma looked at the road stretching ahead, endless and unknown. Fear and excitement mixed in her chest. "Let's go," she whispered. The first few days felt like a dream. They drove through winding roads, stopping in small towns to eat at diners where no one knew their names. They camped by rivers, where Daniel tried to fish and failed, making them laugh until their stomachs hurt. They watched the sun sink behind mountains and sat outside wrapped in blankets, drinking cheap coffee that tasted like magic under the stars. Every morning was different. Some days they woke to the sound of birds in thick forests. Other days it was waves crashing on rocky coasts. The world outside their camper was wide and unpredictable. And Emma felt alive in ways she never had before. But it wasn't all perfect. They argued sometimes about directions, about running out of groceries, about the tiny kitchen where Emma burned dinner more than once. There were nights when the cold seeped through the camper walls and made her long for their warm house back in Oregon. But even in those moments, she noticed something else. Daniel was different. He laughed more. He sang along to songs on the radio. He looked at her like they were young again. One evening in Montana, they parked on a hill overlooking a valley painted gold by the setting sun. Daniel pulled out 2 folding chairs and set them up by the camper. They sat in silence for a while, the wind brushing against their faces. Emma turned to him, studying the lines of his face. It's a man she thought she had already known so completely. "I never thought I'd say yes to something like this," she admitted softly. "But I think I needed it too." Daniel reached for her hand, his eyes shining. "Emma, I carried this dream for years. But it wouldn't have meant anything without you." Her throat tightened at his words. She realized this wasn't just his fantasy. Annie Merritt had become theirs. Every mile they drove, every sunrise they watched, every laugh and argument shared in that tiny camper, it all wove them closer together. The road became their story. They weren't just surviving in routines anymore. They were living in the unexpected. Emma found herself waiting for each new morning, curious about what small adventure it would bring. A flat tire became a memory. A wrong turn became a discovery. Every little moment carried meaning because it was theirs. One night, parked near a lake in Colorado, Emma woke in the dark to find Daniel sitting outside, staring at the stars. She wrapped herself in a blanket and stepped out quietly, sitting beside him. "Couldn't sleep?" she asked. He shook his head, his eyes still fixed on the sky. "I was just thinking, this is everything I ever dreamed of. And it's real. Because you said yes." Emma leaned against his shoulder, her heart swelling. In the quiet night, she realized that her answer had done more than give Daniel his dream, had given her back a part of herself she didn't know was missing. The road was not easy. It was not always comfortable, but it was alive, and so were they. The road became their teacher. It stripped away comfort, routine, and all the small shields they had built around themselves. In its place, it gave them raw moments, sometimes hard, sometimes breathtaking. Emma soon realized this was not just Daniel's dream. It was the rebirth of their marriage. They crossed into Colorado after a long stretch of highway. The mountains rose tall and silent, snow on their peaks, and Daniel's smile never left his face. They parked near a lake, the water like glass under the evening sky. Emma watched him set up a small fire, his movements easy and content, and felt something stir inside her. She had seen him in work clothes, in the routine of daily life. But out here, he seemed lighter, younger, even braver. Nights were their favorite. They sat close under blankets, listening to the crackle of fire, the stars thick above them. One evening, Daniel pulled out his old guitar, the one that had gathered dust for years in their home. He strummed clumsy chords, laughed at himself, and then played softly until the night grew colder. Emma rested her head against him, thinking, this is the life we never knew we needed. Not every day was easy. There were mornings when the water pump stopped working, nights when the cold crept through the thin camper walls, and days when they drove for hours without finding a place to stop. Sometimes Emma missed the security of their old house, the warm bed, the steady paycheck. But then Daniel would point out a herd of wild horses running across the plain. Or they'd stumble onto a small-town festival filled with music and laughter, and all doubts would fade. One of the hardest moments came in Arizona. They had driven too far without planning, and by nightfall they found themselves on an empty road with no campsites nearby. Daniel grew tense, frustrated, while Emma sat quietly, trying not to argue. After an hour of searching, they pulled off the road near a desert ridge, exhausted and silent. That night, in the cramped camper, their frustration boiled into words. "We should have planned better," Daniel muttered. "Maybe," Emma replied sharply. "But this was your dream, not mine." The silence that followed was heavy. Emma regretted the words as soon as they left her mouth. She turned away, her chest tight, realizing how fragile dreams could feel when reality pressed in. But in the morning, when the sun rose over the desert, painting the sky in shades of fire, Daniel reached for her hand. His voice was soft. "Emma, I don't want this dream if it means losing us." Tears stung her eyes. She held his hand tight. "You're not losing me. I just need to know we're in this together. Not just chasing your fantasy, but building ours." From that moment, everything changed. They stopped calling it his dream. It became their life. They planned together, chose stops together, made mistakes together. Every struggle became easier because they shared it. Every joy became brighter because they lived it side by side. By the time they reached Montana, Emma felt different. She no longer thought of what they had left behind. She thought only of the present, the laughter echoing in the camper, the quiet mornings with Daniel making coffee on the tiny stove, the evenings when they watched the sun fade from mountaintops. One night in particular stayed with her. They were parked near a meadow, the sky spilling over with stars. Emma turned to Daniel and whispered, "Do you ever think about how we used to live?" He nodded, his hand resting on hers. "All the time. We were comfortable, safe. But Emma, I don't think we were alive the way we are now." She smiled through tears, realizing how far they had come. "I used to believe saying yes to this would break us. Instead, it saved us." Double quotes. Daniel pulled her close, his forehead resting against hers. "Thank you for trusting me, for trusting us." The months rolled by, and each mile deepened their love. They weren't just partners, they were companions on an adventure neither had fully imagined. They laughed over burnt dinners, sang along to old songs, argued and forgave, and found beauty in places they never thought they'd see. Emma discovered that freedom wasn't only about the open roadite, was about the space it gave their hearts to grow. She no longer worried about what others thought. She no longer wondered what life might have been. She was living it right there with Daniel beside her. Their marriage was no longer quiet and predictable. It was alive, messy, vibrant, and real. And Emma knew deep down that saying yes to Daniel's secret had changed everything. One evening, parked on a hill with the Rockies stretching before them, Emma turned to her husband. Her voice was soft but steady. "I think this is what love really is, Daniel. Not just comfort, not just safety. It's saying yes, even when it scares you." Daniel kissed her forehead, his voice thick with emotion. "And it's knowing that when you said yes, you gave me more than a dream. You gave us a new beginning." Emma looked at the horizon, the sky glowing in gold and pink, and felt her heart settle in a way it never had before. The road ahead was long and uncertain, but she no longer feared it, because she had learned something powerful. Sometimes love means stepping into the unknown, and sometimes the unknown is where love finally comes alive. And with that truth in her heart, Emma knew she had found more than an adventure. She had